All right, everyone should be seeing the presentation at this point. All right. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is how to bring fun and engagement to your peer support groups. I'll talk a little bit more about why I put this presentation together, what it means to me, and then we'll get into hopefully some really practical tips and tricks that can help elevate your groups to the next level. So I'm Aaron Barrow. I'm an Air Force veteran. I'm also in recovery. I've been working at the VA for 12 years and facilitating groups the whole time. I've also took several, group facilitation classes, including RAP, taking charge of my life and health. The list kind of goes on and on. I also am a national speaker. I've spoke at several conventions, including Peerpocalypse. This was one of my favorites. I was a speaker at Peerpocalypse for like 5 years running. Love that. And so on and so forth. Today, I'm going to run this presentation sort of like one of my groups. So we're going to have 3 panelists that are going to act as our group members today. So every time we give a demonstration, or every time I talk about a different tool, one of my 3 group members, which is going to be Dan Friedrich, who's a Marine veteran and a peer support specialist. He serves as a peer mentor team lead for the Veteran Peer Services Program at NAMI. Tammy Davis, you want to wave, Tammy? She's going to be another one of my group members. She's a post 9/11 Army veteran and a certified veteran behavioral health specialist. She's passionate about using her voice and lived experience to support and encourage fellow veterans on their healing journeys. And finally, Darcy Standifer. She's also an Air Force veteran that started working for NAMI in 2002 to 2004. She joined up again in 2019 and we'll be facilitating a group pretty soon here in Lane County, at the Lane County NAMI. So welcome, Darcy. So the 3 of them are going to be my mock group members for today. All right, this is what we're going to be learning about. First thing I'm going to talk about is what the building blocks are of a really strong peer support group. I'm going to talk about how to get your group started off on the right foot. Get it kind of going with a lot of momentum so people feel connected right out the gate. I'm going to move into like the middle portion of group. So now that you've got your group started, now that it's running and it's a lot of fun, how do you keep the momentum going and how do you keep those conversations flowing? I'm also going to talk, and I don't have it on the screen here, but I'm going to talk about what you do at the end of group, how you kind of close things out so people feel like they got a lot out of group and are connected and have some closure towards the end of your group too. At the very end, I'm going to give you some broader tips and some possible pitfalls you might run into. And then we're going to leave about a half hour for some Q&A if you have any questions. So that's a good segue. So if you have some questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But for now, we're going to have a big Q&A session at the very end. So if you have a lot of questions, what we're going to do is save the bulk of them for the end of the presentation. Sound good? All right. So why did I put this together? Well, way back in 2011, when I took my peer certification training, I had a week of wonderful training and like an hour of group facilitation training. Little slice of the book. We talked about it for about an hour, but we really didn't cover what group facilitation looks like. They did this poll at the VA, and I don't know if this translates into the community itself, but they found that the bulk of all peer specialists at the VA, something like 82%, are facilitating groups. But we don't really have any training. There hasn't been training in a long time. Now, NAMI, in their certification training, is now offering group facilitation skills as a part of their training, but that wasn't the case for a long time. And I want to be good at this. This is something I'm doing like 3 to 4 days a week. At one point, I had like 8 groups on my schedule a week and no training. So what I started doing was I started signing up for other people's classes. I took RAP and became a certified RAP facilitator. I took taking charge of my life and health. I took motivational interviewing. I took a bunch of different classes. And I kind of ran into a problem. The thing I was getting was these wonderful group facilitation skills, and I was getting better at what I was doing. But every time I took a class, guess what? Now I get to be that person's brand ambassador. So now I'm a whole health coach, which is awesome. But I'm also a whole taking charge of your life and health a whole health coach, which is also awesome. But I'm also a motivational interviewer, which is also awesome. Plus, I'm this person, plus I'm that person. And kind of the challenge here is like, I'm getting these great skills, but every time I take a class and I pick up a skill set for group facilitation, I have to now become something else. And honestly, I'm just really short on bandwidth. There's not a lot of me to go around as it is. But if I have to do all these things for all these people to get the skills that I need to perform my job, I'm kind of in trouble. So I decided to put together this presentation to help you all get some facilitation skills that aren't necessarily connected to any one group or another one. Does that make sense? Okay. So what makes for a really good peer support group? And what I'd like you to do is start to put your answers into the chat box. Go ahead and put them in now. What makes a really good peer support group? I can't remember which one of my co-hosts is going to be reading the answers here.
Me.
All right. Thanks, Darcy.
I've got a question, Aaron.
Shoot.
Are you going to be sharing the slides or clips or whatever training things you have? Perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, NAMI's going to have a PDF of the slideshow that they're going to share with folks. So after the presentation, you'll be able to hit up their website or just ask them for a copy of the presentation and you can get it yourself. So what makes for a really great peer support group?
I am seeing, Jay said discussion.
A lot of discussion.
Yeah, discussion. And Kyle said collaboration.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of collaboration. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, and is it Sarlea? Did I say that right? I'm sorry. Said creating safety and trust.
Oh, man, we're going to touch on that too. So creating a safe space. Absolutely.
Alex said open-mindedness and respect.
Keeping an open mind. Thanks, Alex.
Patricia said a good support group involves give and take so that each member feels included.
Whoa. So it's not all just about one person, but it moves around and everybody gets a piece. I really love that. Thank you. Awesome. Man, I don't know if I have to give the presentation anymore. It looks like you got a lot of this covered, you know. So I'm going to do an explainer about peer support. I'm so sorry to the millions of peers in the room because you know all this stuff, but it's just, I'm going to do it real quick. So what's the point? What's the essence of peer support? And this is according to me and some website. I can't even figure out which website I was tapped into, but it's to role model the recovery journey. And that helps to inspire peer hope in the people that we work with. And it shows them that it's possible to recover. Like you can get better, you can feel better, and you can get on your own journey where you feel better on a regular basis. Also, we help other people find their own path. Like we're not telling them what path to take or where to go or what to do. My job is to say, where do you want to go and how do you want to get there? And then help them figure out how to make that journey possible. Also, we develop relationships, and this is based on mutual respect and our shared histories, you know? Like, I've been there, done that. I'm in recovery myself. I've got so many years of sobriety, if that's your thing, and mental health recovery, if that's your thing. I can talk to you about what my journey looked like, and hopefully we can create a really strong connection and bond that way. Also, we act as a guide. This darn recovery thing is really complicated. So, and the systems around the medical systems, the government systems, the recovery systems, they're really complicated. And so we can also act as a guide for folks who are in recovery. Again, through peer support on this call, you know this stuff. But the reason I bring this up is just because that's what a good peer support group should embody. As a peer, when I'm running a group, I'm going to, oh, whoops, I didn't mean to leave that last part on. I'm going to bring the energy of a fellow group member. Like I'm someone who's been there. I'm not leading this group as much as I'm facilitating it. And I'm just helping you all to kind of share into this space. I'm here to learn too. Here's some of my story. I'm part of this group instead of being like me and you. The group is centered on the peer's journey. So it isn't a group about where I want you to go. It's a group about where you want to go and how you're going to share that with the group. And how's the group want to get there, you know? It also creates a very connected environment. It's very relationship driven versus a lot of classes I've been in. So we do create that safe space. And I remember someone mentioned that. And we invite a lot of peer input. So we really want to get the ideas and the suggestions and the knowledge from the other people in the group versus me just being like the source of all knowledge, you know. Also, they're not really focused on delivering information. Like a lot of classes that I've taken and a lot of classes that the social workers I work with, the psychologists that I work with present are all information based, like PNDB, DBS. It's like, here's information and getting this information is going to make you better. So I don't give out a lot of information. What I'm here to do is to get your information, not provide information. And that's kind of a beautiful thing because that means I don't have to know about everything. When I started facilitating groups, I thought I had to know everything. I had to be like the master of recovery. I had to have the perfect recovery isms. Like I had to be everything to everybody. It was really stressful, you know, but one of the great things about being a peer, our superpower, is we don't have to know everything. I'm not here to know all the answers. I'm here to help you figure out what your answers are. So that really takes a lot of the pressure off of me when I'm facilitating a group. One of my favorite examples of a peer-run group is RAP. RAP was put together by people who are in recovery. It was developed by someone who's in recovery using a focus group of people who are in recovery. 4 people are in recovery. And you can really see that in the way that RAP's put together. It asks for group members' buy-in from the very start of the group, explores wellness tools that are utilized by different group members. They can share wellness tools that work for them. It encourages like a deep level of conversation and sharing by its group members. The facilitators, like when I run a RAP group, I can tell you about the way it's organized, but I'm just more of a guide. I'm not trying to educate folks. I'm just trying to guide them on the process of creating their own plan. And it's really focused on strengths and people's goals and needs versus being focused on their deficits. So there's a really fun technique I use when I start a RAP group. And I've got a very new group of people. They haven't worked together. And they don't know much about each other. I use this as a get to know you exercise, and I'm going to demonstrate this with our group. So welcome to RAP, everybody. Now, the first thing we have to do is make sure that we have a safe space today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create some group agreements together. But the first thing that we have to do when we're creating our group agreements is come up with an awesome name for our group. So Dan, what would you call our RAP group? Right off the cuff, what's the first thing that pops in your mind?
I love Tammy's. I don't want to take it, so I'm gonna stay with the veterans supporting veterans.
Veterans supporting veterans. I love it. Thanks, Dan. What about you, Darcy? Like, what's your idea?
I like veterans helping other veterans.
All right, veterans helping other veterans. Thank you, Darcy. Now you can get really wild with these. What about you, Tammy? What are you thinking?
I think All-Star Veterans is a good name.
All-Star Veterans, I love it. Now, before I close this down for a vote, anybody have any names that they haven't thrown out yet that they'd like to add? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a vote. And I want everybody to vote, and you only get 2 votes. And if you vote more than twice, I'm kicking you out of the voting process. You understand? Only 2 votes per person. So how many people want to vote for veterans supporting veterans? No votes. Oh my gosh. All right, it's off the list.
I'll give
You're
one.
Gone. Okay, I've got 1.
Yeah, there we go.
1 vote for veterans supporting veterans. What about veterans helping other veterans? Did I get any votes for that? Oh, I got 1 from Darcy. Got 1 from Kathy. I can't see everybody. I'm sorry. I only see like 4 people at a time. All right. Looks like we've got several votes. Let's say 3. And how about All-Star Veterans? How many votes do we have for All-Star Veterans? All right. Got 1, 2.
I'll vote for that.
3, 4. Oh my gosh. This is like a landslide. It looks like All-Star Veterans is the name of our group agreement. Ooh. There you go. So that you know what I love about this is right out of the gate, everyone's talking. I'm asking everybody for ideas. If there's someone who's a little quieter or a little more shy, I'll ask them specifically, like, hey, did you think of anything? Is there anything that's popping to mind? They can be wild. They can be like Darth Vader. Over the years, I've done rap for 10 years, and we've had Delta. We've had our most, the one that I like the most is our most recent one is VWA, Veterans with Attitude. So it's the beginning of every group, we shout out Veterans with Attitude. But you can really get wild with this, and it's a great tool to start your group. So another great thing about peers is we're really good with support groups. I mean, if you're like me, you've probably been to like 1,000 support groups, right? And this has really given us some real insider skills and knowledge about what goes into a good support group. When we're running a support group, our connected histories, again, can create some really beautiful dialogue with the people we're working with. They can really deepen the conversation, get past like the surface level stuff to some deeper stuff. Also, I come from a trauma background. I know a lot of people do. And so I can be a little more sensitive to trauma when I see it pop up in group and some of the trauma markers, which can be really helpful. Sometimes if someone's trying to avoid a topic because it's really something that's really sensitive, I can kind of steer away from it. Other times when I feel like maybe it's something people need to talk about, we can take a deeper dive into something that's a little more sensitive. So it just having that sense, because we come from that sort of background, can be really helpful. Also, gosh, if I've been in a million peer support group or support groups myself, like I kind of know how they work. I know how the flow works. I know what the timing looks like. I know what they feel like. I know what a really powerful group feels like versus a group that's not so great. So running support groups can be really beneficial if you're a peer. So how do we open our groups? How do we get people talking right off the bat? And I gave you one example already. But first, let's ask a question. So I want to know from the group, is it okay to make the quiet people talk? Or should we just leave them alone? Like, what's the deal? Tammy, were you going to be reading these?
I am.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
I'm just gonna, if I see anything. So far, I'm not seeing anything.
All right. I need some answers, group. Is it okay? Is it not okay? I mean, any answers all right?
Jay says inviting them. Invite them, but allow them to decide.
Right on. So extend the invitation, but it's okay if they decline.
And several people are seconding and thirding that.
Right.
Alex says maybe invite them, but not make them.
Okay. So be given a choice, but not make them. This is a really sticky question. I'm sure if you've ever been facilitating or in a support group, there's that one guy or gal or person, individual in the back, and they're just like scowling and they got their arms crossed. And I don't want to call on them because I'm afraid they'll say something mean. But what I found is that about 80% of the time when I ask that person to say something, they have something really insightful to say when I invite them into the conversation. Sometimes, this happened to me today, I invited one of those individuals to speak, and they kind of gave me this snap response. Hey, if I wanted to talk, I would. I'm like, okay. Try not to take offense and just move on to the next person, So most of the time, though, I've had good results. It's really been surprising. People, a lot of times, they just need room to enter into the conversation. I want to talk real quick about room design. As a peer specialist, with my trauma history, I have a hard time with people sitting right behind me. It's really can be, I don't know, like I'm using the term trigger because for veterans, the word trigger can be a trigger. Anyway, it could be really activating for me to have someone behind me. Also, when there's someone who's kind of shy, where do they want to sit? If there's chairs stacked behind chairs, where do they usually go? To the back, right? The cool kids in class. Although cool might equal just nervous and anxious and not sure if they want to share with the group. And so this room right here is a room I did wrap in today. It's kind of tough to do because people still need spaces to write on, but I also don't want to set it up in a way where people are sitting behind people or feeling excluded. And so what I did was I created a super table. I put 3 tables together. So we could still make a really big circle, but when it came time to write, people would have the availability to write. So anytime I'm creating a group space, I'm going to do my best to get people situated in a way that they can see each other's faces. I think it really helps with that connected feeling of a really strong group. Sometimes it's not possible, but if it is possible, I do my best to set that up. So right off the bat, I like to set expectations. When I was running you through the exercise where we were throwing out names and then voting on it, I go into the next step and I create group agreements. Perhaps a little different in the way that you ask group members to create the group agreements. And so we'll go through a long brainstorming session and talk about what helps people feel safe in group. And it's different. We usually get like the top 5, but then there's usually other things that do and aren't included. Like some people are like, we don't want people that are late. So the rule is if you're later than 10 minutes, don't show up. Other groups are like, we don't care if people are late, just as long as they come in quietly. So that's the rule for that group. Kind of depends. Some of the top group, some of the top expectations in most groups or group agreements are use I statements. That's my biggest one, is use I statements. I, as a person, like to generalize sometimes and say everybody does this or everybody does that, and it can be sort of a challenge. You know, I'm sure you all had people in group that tell long stories about what other people do, and so I like to set that expectation right off the bat. I'd like everybody to use I statements. I feel this way. This is my experience. This is what I've done. You know, also discourage cross-talking or talking over other people. Giving advice, as I love giving advice, even when it's not asked for. So I've worked for years not to do this in group, and I also ask for my group members not to give each other advice, and unless they specifically say, "I'd love some advice if anyone has some," you know. Also, as one of my newest favorite rules is people in recovery tend to have a high level of anxiety, or they probably wouldn't be in recovery, right? And so I know that folks, especially in a really crowded room, like the picture I just showed you, also had people sitting right next to each other, and it was a little harder to get in and out. So what I say is, hey, if you're feeling anxious or something's going on where you really need to take a break, feel free. You can leave the room, take a breath, come back when you're ready. It's okay. And that's been a really beneficial piece of my groups. I think people feel less anxious when they know that they're not trapped. They can get out anytime they want. And finally, of course, the big, granddaddy of all group agreements, confidentiality. What says in this room stays in this room, you know. Of course, as providers, there's few things we have to tell somebody about if someone's going to hurt themselves or others. We have a legal requirement, but otherwise, setting the expectation that this is a safe space, an anonymous space, can be really helpful. So for new groups, it can be really good to have a check-in process. It's always good to have a check-in process, but you can have your check-in process be a little more geared towards getting people talking together. And this can vary too. If you have a really large group and you only have like an hour, but you have like 14 people, you don't want the check-in to be like 10 minutes long because you won't get around the room. You'll never actually get to the group. So when you do the check-in, you can keep it kind of short. You can do this popcorn style, or you can do it around the room. A lot of the times I like going around the room because that sort of sets an expectation that people are going to share, even if it's just one word, which can kind of get people talking. And if they're struggling a bit, they can also say pass, that's okay, but I'll do it that way. Sometimes I'll do it popcorn style. I'll say, hey, whenever you're ready to jump in, please do. So let's try this one out. Dan, can you please tell me one word that pops in your head when you hear the word recovery?
Hope.
Tammy?
Support.
Darcy?
Wellness.
Thank you. See, it's beautiful. Everybody kind of speaks, but you move around the room, and then you have this kind of like flow. You could also have people describe their weather today. Like right now I'm feeling like a little hot with some wind on the way. It could be kind of fun. Now, if you have a small group, say you only have like 4 or 5 people and you have a lot of time, you can make it a little more complex, you know? You can ask like, I'd like to know your name and how you're feeling this week. Darcy, like, why are you spending time with us today?
Or just to get some connection with my recovery.
Just really to get some deeper level connection with your recovery. Thank you, Darcy. You could ask, how do you know a friend's been struggling? A lot of the times when you're working with a group, people who are brand new to a situation, and even somebody who's been in a group for a long time, might not want to talk about themselves. They might not feel comfortable or open, but it can be way easier to talk about somebody else. So I could say, like, Tammy, like, how do you know that your friend's been struggling? Like, what are some of the signs that they're showing?
And I would say something like, we used to talk times a week and I haven't heard from her in 3.
Yeah, we used to talk regularly, but I wouldn't have heard from her for a long time. Thanks, Tammy. It can also be really fun getting to know you exercises, you know? Like, Dan, if you could be any type of ice cream, what would you be?
Rocky Road.
Rocky Road. Now, why Rocky Road?
Recovery. It's a rocky road.
I love it because recovery can be a rocky road.
It's not a good day. Yeah.
Yeah. Or what's your favorite season? You know, you can make it a little more complex and ask for a deeper level of answers. Now, if you've got like a more established group, like you've had a group of folks that have a meeting every week for several weeks, then you can get kind of past the get to know you stuff and more focused on just connecting people who haven't seen each other for a little bit. Like, please tell me how your week has been. What have you done this week to strengthen your recovery? It also can revolve around your topic. So if I'm doing a rap class and my next group's about early warning signs, I can start it off by saying, like, Darcy, like, how do you know? What's like one of the earliest signs that you're about to have a hard time or things are getting a little tough? What's a sign for you?
I get very anxious and I eat a lot of junk food.
Oh, you get anxious and you start eating more junk food. What about you, Tammy? What's a sign that things are getting a little rough in your life and you might be heading to a hard time?
If I cancel something that's been scheduled more than one time in a week.
Oh, you start canceling appointments, especially something that comes up a lot. Thanks, Tammy. So this is a great segue into the topic early warning signs. And Raf, an early warning sign is something that's happening in your life that shows you that you might be having a hard time soon if you don't take certain actions. So I'll ask group members to talk about this as part of the check-in. Also, it can be a really nice for finding a topic. If you have like a support group and you say, like, I have a support group I run today, we had it at 1:00. And what I say is like, hey, please tell me your name. And since this is a sobriety-based support group, what's your clean or sober date? And what does your recovery look like this week? How's it been going? And then if there's something that maybe 3 or 4 people say on the way around the group, then, oh, okay, everyone's talking about connection today, or people are talking about feeling a little anxious, or people are talking about wanting to figure out how to have fun sober, then that'll be our topic this week. So it's kind of cool because you can sort of suss out a good topic that way that vibes with a group. So when you're trying to get the conversation started, there's several tools you can use. The biggest one you've got is your curiosity. So you are now, I don't know if Sherlock Holmes is a good example because maybe I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes when I was a kid, but they might not be a big deal these days. You're the detective of your choice. Really exercise your curiosity. You are now a detective and you're trying to figure stuff out. I could say, like, Dan, like, why is being clean so hard anyway?
Sometimes it doesn't feel fun.
Just doesn't feel fun sometimes. We can ask some people what they know about a certain subject. Like, Darcy, what do you know about wellness tools?
Well, I know that wellness goals, you have to set something up that you know that will work for you. Okay, I'm not supposed to say this in short.
That's fine, yeah.
Wellness goals would be not eating so much junk food, eating fruit instead.
So you're finding things that really work well for you. That's a sign of a good wellness tool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Darcy. You could really challenge the group too. You can ask them tough questions. You can ask for a recap from the week before and watch the smoke pour out of their ears. It's okay if smoke's pouring out of people's ears sometimes. That's okay to challenge people to come up with an answer when they might not have the best answer, because that's where that deeper level of thought comes, and that can also spark some really meaningful conversation within the group. You can start with a short reading, and I want to caution you here. A lot of my early groups were, let's read the book for 45 minutes and then we could talk about it for a minute and close group for the day. It's easy. It's easier sometimes to just read something or watch a video, but it shouldn't be what dominates the group. I can watch a video anytime I want. I got a phone. I can watch it on the bus. I can watch it at home. I can read a book anytime I want. But you know what I can't do is really share meaningful experiences with other people that are on the same trajectory that I'm on. And so I try to focus away. If I read something, I'll try to keep it to 1 to 2 paragraphs max. And then I'll pick out pieces from that reading and ask group members to expand on it. Or I'll say something like, hey, did that ring any bells? What we just read ring any bells? Did it spark anything in you? And if it did, what was it? And they'll tell me about the thing, like a paragraph or a section or a word that really sparked their interest, and then that'll lead to a good discussion. I'll tell some personal stories sometimes. Like when I was really suffering from some deep level of depression, I like to keep my curtains closed. It was really hard to know that the sun was shining while I was feeling so bad. And then, that can really spark some connection with the group too. Like people might vibe with that, and it can start a really good conversation. All right, so now that you got your group started, how do you keep the conversation flowing? So let me ask you guys, and gals, sorry. Let me ask the group. How do you keep people talking? Like, go ahead and put your answer in the chat box. Like, what are some, or just say it. We have such a small group today. If you want to shout it out, you can do that. Like, how do you keep people talking in your support groups?
Jay says, ask open-ended questions.
Oh my gosh, you just stole my thunder, Jay. Dang it.
You did.
Asking open-ended questions. I love it. What else we got?
Yeah, Patricia says engaging each other.
All right, engaging each other. So asking folks for their buy-in, and then they ask me for my buy-in.
And Sarala, apologize, I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Pick different members to talk.
So don't always focus on the same person, but move the conversation around the room. Dude, I should just end it right here. I think you got it.
I tried to build rapport so it's more natural, like that organic.
So you build the rapport with the people you're working with, and it keeps the conversation more organic. I love that. Man, you're killing me because you just steal my thunder here. All right. So how do you keep people talking? I'm a big fan of motivational interviewing, and a little bit different than when I studied it. I took motivational interviewing as a class, and a lot of that, when you're talking to a psychologist or a social worker, is trying to convince somebody to think the way you think. But I like motivational interviewing in its ability to find deeper meaning behind what people are saying and help them see it outside of yourself. You might have noticed for this entire presentation, whenever I talk to one of my panelists and they say something, I'll reflect it back to them. Or I'll repeat it for the group. Or when Dan was reading the answers to the questions, I was repeating those answers. I do that in group because it helps the people that are giving the answer see it outside of themselves. And when they can see it outside of themselves, it becomes a different thing and adds a different layer of meaning. This is a little complicated, and so I'm not sure if I can explain it really well, but I would highly recommend if you ever get a chance to study some motivational interviewing. They have some really good concepts there. So when you're working with the group, you want to use some basic reflections, complex reflections, and metaphors to repeat what people are saying. Now, a basic reflection is just like one word. That's it. So if I ask Darcy, like, Darcy, why is it so hard to meet new people? Like, why is that a difficult thing?
Because I feel insecure.
Insecure. Something about just saying, just like grabbing the one word that really kind of highlights the meaning behind that sentence can be really powerful, and it can help folks want to continue talking and add to that thought. You can also use complex reflections. And what the complex reflection is intended to do is to find the deeper meaning behind what somebody just said. I think when Darcy and I were practicing this earlier, she said something else. And then my complex reflection is, you're feeling insecure. So I, so it's taking the idea and trying to add another layer to it, like find the deeper meaning behind what someone just said to you. And it's so hard to demonstrate when I'm trying to do it. It's like playing the piano or an instrument. It's easy to do if you're not really thinking about it much when I'm like leading a group, but it's hard to do if I really want to. Shoot. I don't know, Darcy. Let's think about a good question. Huh. Why is junk food so darn appealing anyway?
Oh, it's incredibly sweet and tasteful, and it just makes you feel good.
So it just hits all those notes that make your brain like sing.
Yes. Yeah.
Sort of like that, but it's like I said, it's hard to do. Another thing you can do is find metaphors to summarize what people are saying. And this one can be a little tricky. It's another thing that's hard to do in progress, but when you're using a metaphor to reiterate what somebody's saying, be careful with this one. And you can ask if it fits. And if it doesn't fit, people are happy to correct you. And that can be really helpful too. If someone says something and I say, it's like you're feeling like a fish out of water. And they say, no, it's not really like that. I can say, well, what did you mean? Or they could say, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. And blah, 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 blah. You know, using metaphors can be really helpful too. Just like I said, just be careful not to overuse that one. Another thing that one of our panelists, I think it was Alex, mentioned, I'm not positive, is to ask open-ended questions. And what's an open-ended question? I'm just going to throw that out to the group. Tammy, what's an open-ended question?
Something you can't answer with just a yes or a no.
That's right. So I could ask Tammy, I could say, Tammy, do you like chocolate or vanilla?
Depends on the day.
Oh, you're killing me. But that was a closed question. Or I could say, Tammy, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Neapolitan.
Okay, that was a one-word answer too. It's killing me. Anyway, but yeah, an open-ended question is a question that doesn't have like one answer. How old are you? When's the last time you brushed your teeth? Those are all closed questions. Open questions are like, someone says they like the color purple, like, what is it about the color purple that really speaks to you? You know, what is your favorite thing about your car? Something that invites a lot of deeper level of thinking and a deeper reply can really be great for sparking a conversation in a group. Also, I think somebody else mentioned this. I'm not sure who it was, Dan, but someone mentioned that it's good to move the conversation around the room. I totally agree. Sometimes you've got your talkers, right? And you got your quiet folks. And a lot of the times I'm a quiet folk and I'm a talker, just depends on the group. But I like to make sure that our quiet folks get the opportunity to share if they want to. So if I notice that all the speaking's happening in this corner of the room, I'll say, oh, well, Dan, what do you think about owls? I mean, are you a fan too? I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but.
Yeah, they're pretty quiet and I don't always like sharing in groups. And so I kind of resonate with them. Just kind of hang out in trees and look at it.
You really find kindred spirits with owls.
That's right.
Nice. So I'll move it to someone who hasn't talked in a long time. And that can usually spark some really strong discussion. Sometimes they don't want to talk, but if they don't, they'll just say, I'd rather not talk today, or, that's okay. Or I'll ask them specifically what they think about. If Dan just said, owls are quiet, and so I really resonate with that quiet feeling in group, I could say, Darcy, what do you think about, feeling like you want to be quiet in group? Is that something that you agree with or resonate with too?
Well, yes, if I'm not feeling all together, because sometimes you have hard days and you just need to sit and be quiet, but sometimes you don't need to be quiet all the time. So sometimes yes, and sometimes no.
So who else here has ever had a hard day? Can I see a show of hands? Would anybody like to expand on that? Is an example of what I would do in group. So if if two people kind of throw out the same topic, I might throw it out to the group. And a lot of time other people will be resonating and we'll get more connection that way too. So you can latch onto ideas generated by the topic and kind of throw it out to the wider group as a whole. I also want you to know that silence can be a good thing. That's a little joke in your group. I tend to want to jump into every vacuum in the conversation. When someone stops speaking, if there's a quiet period, I want to jump in and fill that air with some sort of conversation. Can be really uncomfortable sometimes. But that same level of uncomfortability that I'm feeling when there's like a void in the discussion can also kind of create, what that nature abhors a vacuum, can also create a space that people want to fill in. And so they can get them sharing more. Also, sometimes people don't, if they're trying to grasp or speak about a difficult concept, it's not going to come to their mind immediately. So they need a little more time to just relax and let that concept come to them. So really, silence can be a good thing. When I'm working one-on-one with somebody, I use this as a tool. And what I'll do is I'll just count to 8 before I speak. And in my head, that way, when they stop speaking, I don't just fill in the gap, but I give them a second. And usually by about 6, they'll continue the thought with a deeper level. So another good way to get people moving and talking is breakout groups. And this can work really well when you have larger groups. Sometimes I have a small wrap group, like 6 people. Hey, sorry. If that's the case, 6 people can have a really robust conversation just fine. But if I have like 12 to 14, not everybody can talk, especially if we have a limited amount of time. And so what I'll do is I'll create breakout groups. Breakout groups can be an amazing tool for making sure everybody has a chance to speak and have a voice within the group. It can be really good in large group settings. It gives more people a chance to talk and share. It can mix it up. So there's a couple of ways that you can pick your breakout groups. You can group people together. So if you've noticed that a bunch of people are sitting next to each other that kind of know each other, well, you can work with that. You can say, okay, you 3 at this desk, you're a breakout group. You 3 over here, you're a breakout group. Maybe they're feeling more comfortable that way. Sometimes I like to break it up though. I like to have them, I'll ask the veterans I'm working with, I'll say, hey, I'm gonna give you a number. I want you to say your number between 1 and 4. So you're, oh gosh, sorry, I'm not explaining this well. I'll have people say the number. So Dan, you're 1, say 1.
1.
Darcy?
2.
Tammy?
3.
And then we'll just rinse and repeat. All the 1s, you go over here. All the 2s, you're in this group. All the 3s in this group. And that can be kind of good too, because people sort of self-select for folks that they feel comfortable with, or they might have some sort of affinity for. But if you're really trying to get some deeper level conversation, sometimes it's good to interact with people that you might not talk to normally, or might have some different ideas in your own. So I'll break the group up that way. I always ask for someone, a secretary of the group. to just record everything that's being said, and then they can report back when we come back as a larger group. That way, people do feel heard, because even if they're talking about it in the breakout group, it's going to become part of the topic for the larger group when everybody comes back together. I'll give the secretaries a chance to report out what the groups talked about. I also will tend to move from group to group if I can, just to make sure folks are staying on topic, not talking about the baseball game from last week or the movie they're going to see tomorrow night, but actually kind of staying on topic, you know? So guess what? How many people do we have? We might not have enough people.
I've got it all set up, Aaron. I've got it all set up. Yep.
All right, then let's go to a breakout group now. Woo! We're going to take about 8 minutes, and we're going to talk a bit in smaller groups.
Are we going to lead it with anything? Are we going to have like just talking about breakout groups or what?
Yeah, actually, what I wanted us to talk about, each group, I want you to talk about how you keep the conversation flowing in your own groups. Like, what techniques do you use to keep the conversation flowing? And our moderators are going to act as secretaries for these small groups. All right, I'll see you in about 8 minutes.
All right, here we go.
Well, why don't I ask our secretaries to share out? So, Dan, what about you? What did your group come up with?
Well, we had a really great discussion. I mean, there was a lot of different ideas, you know, like some of them were around being mindful of the group dynamic, you know, in different ways that we could, you know, keep the conversation going. One was checking into, you know, what is something someone's grateful for, you know, each individual person, you know, what is something someone's excited about in their life. You know, giving space for pauses and space for people to enter the group as they feel comfortable and want to talk about what's going on. But I really did like the thought and like the intention around, you know, each group has its own dynamic and each group has its own nuance, and you know, there's not a right or wrong answer. It just kind of goes off of the vibe in the group, like, and thinking of questions to engage the group and get people talking.
Wow. So really finding a lot of nuance in what people are saying. That's really interesting, and treating each group like its own special individual person instead of lumping it all, you know, thinking every group's going to be the same. Thank you, Dan. What about you, Tammy? What did you what did your group come up with?
First of all, I need to give a shout out, because when we broke out into groups, my screen went blank, so I actually couldn't see the people that I was talking to. So that was awesome that they still were willing to participate. And so Pat shared that oftentimes she will just sit inclusive in the group and not like sit at the lead of a office space, and that way it invites inclusion and just inclusion. Yeah. Okay. And then several people in my group worked at residential facilities, and so they like to sometimes be intentional with bringing up you know, the high and low of the day or the high and low of a week, and then future plans to kind of get people thinking about how the rest of their residential time is going to go for the week.
Wow. Okay.
That was really good. And then
so bringing in sort of like what's been going on with you, how are you feeling, and where do you want to go this week, and what's next?
Yeah. And then also just varieties of brief check-ins or subject selected group meetings, and just including flexibility at all stages of the meeting. So it was really great.
Thanks, Tammy. I pretty appreciate that, especially that idea of flexibility, and just like just like Dan was saying, like treating every group is a little different and being able to just go with the flow. What about you, Darcy? What does your group talk about?
So my group had some of the same things, but just to add a little bit difference, that the facilitator has to be engaged, and the facilitator has to be authentic, and so should the group as well. Looking for a common theme or a uniting topic for the group. One thing that I didn't think about until I saw it, having a positive body language. when you don't look bored or anything like that. And then giving out positive affirmations, maintaining positivity.
So just kind of like encouraging group members and letting them know that they're heard and making sure that they're comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, Darcy. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing out. Well, our group talked about, gosh, we mentioned so much. I ran out of sticky notes, So they talked about watching what people are saying during group and pulling themes out of that and using that as a way to deepen the discussion by highlighting some of those themes. Also talked a lot about Kathy about if she has new folks to group, really offering them a lot of encouragement and then and really highlighting what they're doing in a positive way, like really specifically. And also letting them know that there's really no wrong way to be and that they're welcome however they present to the group. Also, if she asks new folks what they're interested in and then connects them to other group members that might have similar interests. So I thought that was really cool. Alex threw out this really cool idea. So he'll tell a story about himself, an anecdote, and he'll ask the group for some advice or support, which is awesome. Because people, if you're like me, love giving advice. And so he asks the group, like, what would you do in that situation? And lets them fill in the blanks. Also, I think that they both kind of highlighted just making sure that everybody is on the same page, making sure everybody's got the same information and they know what's going to happen next. Well, thank you very much for everyone who participated in our breakout groups. Barbara, I'm sorry I didn't see you.
All right. It's all right. 9 to 5.
All right. And thank you to our secretaries. You did an awesome job. So let's see if I can get back to our presentation here. And Dan, you might want to spotlight me again. I turned off the spotlight because I just hate staring at myself for the recording.
I got you.
So now that we've gotten into our group and the conversation's flowing, let's talk about how to end your group on a high note. Now, there's a big mistake that I've made before is getting into a really deep, challenging, kind of gut-wrenching topic where people are sharing about something that's really hurt them or really been a challenge in their life. And then the group runs out of time. And I'm like, all right, see ya. And they're just like, because they've just been talking about this really difficult thing. And then everybody just leaves. And so that happened a few times. And it was really a good learning tool for me that's just a really rough way to leave people. So I've come up with some ways that I close groups that kind of give people some closure and wrap things up and kind of end it on a high note too. So towards the end of my groups, what I usually do is I try to just shift out of like the challenges and into the solutions. So I'll ask folks like Dan, like, how have you overcome, or do you have any tips for kind of like being around a lot of people when you're feeling anxious?
I just take a few deep breaths and remember there's a lot of them that are probably feeling anxious too.
All right. So not only do you use some breath work, but you're also trying to put yourself in their shoes and just realize everybody feels a little bit anxious. Thanks, Dan. What about you, Tammy? What's a tip that you've used for overcoming anxiety when you're around a lot of people?
Well, I use self-talk and I just give myself permission to be quiet and to just that being here is enough.
Oh, so you kind of give yourself permission to just be present and kind of like you're saying to yourself, like, hey, I'm good enough. Like I belong in this place. Thanks, Tammy. What about you, Darcy? What's one tip or one thing that you do to help when you're feeling a little anxious around a large group of people?
I keep down the self-talk and I give myself positive affirmations that they're probably just as nervous as I am.
Wow. So I heard that you do a little bit of what Dan does and put yourself in everybody else's shoes, and a little bit of what Tammy does, and kind of like give yourself some positive self-talk and build up your confidence that way. Thank you very much. You can also use a closing checkout. And again, this is time dependent. If you've got a really small group and you got a little more time, then you can give people a broader topic to share out on. Like, please share one idea that you'll take from group today. If it's a really big group, and say you've got 2 minutes left and you got 14 people, I'll just say, please just give me one word of what you're going to take away from this group today. So we'll go in reverse order this time. Like, Darcy, what's one thing you're going to take from this group today?
Connection.
Thank you, Darcy. Tammy?
Encouraged.
Encouraged. Thank you, Tammy. Dan?
Collaboration.
Collaboration. Thank you, Dan. And I'll usually throw a word in at the end, and then, a lot of the more traditional support groups, if you've ever been in an A meeting or an NA meeting, they close it with a prayer or some sort of chant to kind of like unite the group at the end. Also, if someone's been having a really tough time in group, like if they were talking about a really challenging situation and they seem kind of raw, you can offer to touch base with them. Just say, Dan, that thing, you're telling this really kind of difficult story, and would you mind sticking around afterwards so we can just touch base and make sure, and just talk for a minute, just make sure that they're okay that way.
Yeah, thanks for spending the extra time with
me. You're welcome. So here's some tips and on things that you can do to help make your groups better, and then we're going to have a Q&A session. So some things that I would say are good to avoid. Avoid lecturing the group. Sometimes I can get in the lecture mode and I want to tell you all about the universe and how everything works and about everything. But I think a lot of the times it's the fastest way for me to put my group members to sleep is to go on a long lecture about my favorite topic. So I'd really avoid offering lectures in your group. Giving unsolicited advice, I love giving advice. And so sometimes I have to really bite my tongue and not try and jump in and fix a problem that a group member's having. Just let them express challenges with that topic. And if any of you out there have a significant other, you can know that even in a relationship that can be really tough not to try and fix everything. And sometimes the only thing your partner wants to hear is, I'm so sorry you're having such a hard day. They're not asking you to fix it. And it can be the same way in groups. Sometimes people just really need to express the challenge they're having without really looking for a way to fix it. Avoid rescuing groups members. I talked about how good silence is earlier. If someone's trying to articulate a really difficult thought, I'll usually count in my head to 8 before I fill in the gaps, just to give them time to get to that thought if they're going to. Sometimes it's good to fill in and to help them out, but giving people space to really recognize and to highlight that thought can be a good thing too. Cheering people up. Everybody likes happy folks, right? But sometimes cheering somebody up can really throw a group off track, or a really deep discussion off track. Or sometimes someone just needs to be in a poopy mood that day. So I try to do my best to not to run in and try and cheer somebody up if they're having a hard day. Let them share about the hard day, and that might be enough to turn things around. And maybe they'll still have a hard day, but at least they'll have a chance to talk about it a bit. Keep your personal stories and anecdotes short. So if I tell a story about myself, I try to keep it to just a few sentences as a conversation starter, but not to kind of turn the lens on me. Also, if I'm having a rough week and I haven't been doing my own support groups, it can be really tempting to use the group as a support group for me to deal with the stuff that I'm really struggling with. And so it's really important for me to continue to seek my own support groups outside of my work, so that when I come to these groups, I'm, what the old saying is, if you can't you need to fill your own glass before you can fill other people's glasses. So it's important for me to do a lot of this work for myself, and then I can bring my best self to the group, and the group doesn't feel like I'm just there to get fixed by them. You know, it's a collaborative effort, and not something where I'm just there seeking my own therapy. Some other helpful tips. Script can be really helpful, but improvisation, as you all mentioned, can be a wonderful thing. Give your group members time to explore ideas. The thing I really like about rap is that it has a structure and a scaffolding, but Mary Ellen Copeland, who invented rap, said, sometimes if an idea jumps out there and the conversation goes down a rabbit hole, maybe it's something really important that people need to talk about. It's okay to go down that rabbit hole. So if a really cool concept today, I was supposed to be talking about, what were we talking about? I can't remember. We were supposed to be creating the part of the plan, the daily maintenance plan, where people talk about what they have to do on a daily basis to stay well. And we got totally off topic. One of our group members started talking about how they really kind of see the world in a negative way, and it's hard not to be stuck there. And so we ended up getting into this long group conversation about negativity bias and how we kind of grasp onto the negative, and then several group members talked about some of the skills they use to get away from that negative thinking and think in a more positive, uplifting way. It was a great discussion. It was about an hour and 20 minutes, and we didn't do anything that was on my script, but that's okay, because I'll get back to the script next week, and I thought it was an important thing to talk about. Also, if someone's really struggling, and telling like a graphic story or something that's triggering others. Sometimes folks, well, I could give a whole presentation on challenges that you might face with the group. But if someone's starting to tell a really graphic story that might be fairly triggering for other folks, I usually say, hey, that's a really, really deep and important thing that you're saying. Why don't we touch base after group and we can talk about that some more? Sort of move it into a private space where we're just kind of talking one-on-one later, if it's going that way. And we've had a few group members that that's worked with over the years. So the biggest tip I want to give the group is just practice, practice, practice. Facilitating a group can be like conducting an orchestra or playing an instrument. The more you practice, the easier it gets. The flow gets easier. Moving the conversation around the room gets easier. Different techniques that might be hard to do at first, but like using reflections gets easier. Just give yourself some space. You're going to stumble. It happens to everybody. You're going to have bad groups and good groups. Some days can be really awful. Maybe everyone's just in a bad mood. Maybe nobody shows up. Maybe it's fantastic, but give yourself space to have a bad group and have good groups and kind of grow as a person while you're at it. All right, we're a little early, but that's okay. Do you have any questions?
Here, let me stop the recording real quick, Aaron.
Okay.
And I got a question, I think, to start us off with. Jim, I see your hand up too, but let me stop the recording.
Yeah, let me turn off the